This meeting is being recorded, okay. All right? Okay. All right, so I'm going to use my notes. You'll have to forgive me. Anyway, so like other people of his generation, the world was kind of on fire, and he felt compelled to try to do something about it. And he was actually in a good position to do that. Well educated, he had the means to kind of pursue a spiritual path and all the conditions that we all need. I'm gonna slide this way a little for your sake. So he got thoroughly trained by all the best meditation masters of the day, and then he sat down and with this open question: where's all this suffering come from, and what can we do about it? And fundamentally, he came up with the answer that suffering comes from our minds. And the quote is that like the ox leads the wagon, our minds lead our behavior. And so we have this confused view of the world. It causes us to act in confused ways, and we cause suffering for ourselves and for all the people around us. In our whole world, everybody is suffering from that same confusion. So the main path to freedom from suffering is to become aware of how the mind works. So not to change necessarily how the mind works, but to become aware of it so that we are on top of it instead of being dragged by it. We're driving the ox instead of the ox pulling us along. So the first reading was from Thich Nhat Hanh, and I wanted to point out a few things because he talked about interdependence, which Thich Nhat Hanh calls interbeing. Jennifer, you're just going to have to move because she's going like this around you, Steve. And I'm like, okay, look, there's plenty of space. We can have enough. No, you're fine, right? Unless you need to, no, you're all good? Okay, everybody looks good. Okay, sorry. So Thich Nhat Hanh calls it interbeing. He sort of had his own vocabulary, and maybe because Vietnamese was his native language, and he's translating. That's possible. But anyway, interdependence is how the Tibetans call it. And it's the idea that everything is dependent on everything else. Nothing happens to you that doesn't have causes and conditions around you, okay? And so that's an important part of this whole thing. And the other part that he mentioned that I want to point to is that everyone, without exception, has the innate potential to wake up to be a Buddha, basically. And so every sentient being, no exceptions. And our Buddha nature is present in us like water is present in ice. It's not something we have to worry about, it's there. It's that absolutely there. Or like butter is present in milk, we may have to churn a little bit to make it appear, but it's definitely there already, okay? And everyone you see has it too. So that's why the whole kind of like do no harm, because you could be hurting Buddhists, if you're, anyway. Thich Nhat Hanh also pointed out the middle way that we talked about last time, which is that you have to be healthy. If you're going to train your mind, you have to be healthy. You can't abuse yourself and hope to be enlightened. It's just not going to work. And he also pointed to the need to engage with the world. Since we're all interdependent, we have to be concerned about each other, and we have to take care of each other. And these are all fundamental Buddhist teachings coming through Thich Nhat Hanh's point of view. And I want to say about him that he passed away a few years ago in his 90s, but he was a young monk in Vietnam during the Vietnamese War, the war in Vietnam, and he was a refugee, and all of his teachings his whole life were colored by this sense of engagement, social justice, political engagement, He was an advisor to Martin Luther King. He was just a really amazing guy, right? And his teachings all have that flavor. And people that go to his teachings tend to have that feeling too. They resonate with that sense of like, we better fix things, it's our job. Not all Buddhist teachers are like that. Some of them are people who want you to go in a cave and sit there for 20 years. That's another way people express these teachings. But it happens that Thich Nhat Hanh is a socially engaged teacher. So finally, in this reading, he just mentioned the Four Noble Truths, which he doesn't really explain. So I'm going to pause from his reading and talk about the Four Noble Truths for a minute. It is the most basic. If you Wikipedia Buddha teachings, they say the Four Noble Truths, right? Everybody talks about it. Now, I have a teacher I really like named Chogyam Trungpa. He's a writer. He's long passed away in 87 or something. But he was a Tibetan with the unique ability to put things in terms that Westerners could understand. So he first of all was an expert at language. He went to Oxford University, but he also had a very poetic style. So I want to share how he talked about the Four Noble Truths, as opposed to how you'll read it in a classic teaching. So the Four Noble Truths are suffering, the cause of suffering, cessation of suffering, and the path. And usually the path is pointed out as the Noble Eightfold Path, which has to do with how you make a living, etc. Well, and when we're talking about suffering here, Buddha is not talking about the sort of global crisis that I talked about last week. He's just talking about ordinary, everyday suffering. Something that happens to every single human being. Everyone you meet is struggling with the Four Noble Truths. They are in that position. As long as we're in this world, we are suffering and we need to find a way out. So what Chogyam Trungpa, how he describes suffering is he said that we should think of suffering like this, that we are, as humans, we think our purpose in life is to put together this massive jigsaw puzzle. It's like we have this image of what a good life should look like, and we try to fit all these pieces together, and we devote all of our energy, all of our creativity, all of our intelligence, our heart, our soul to this project of putting together a beautiful life. And we think when we finish getting it all the pieces in place, it's just going to be beautiful, right? The trouble is the pieces do not fit together. They never will. Imagine that. They never will. Not only do they not fit together, they're all gaps and misshapen, but they keep changing. They keep sliding around. They keep not being where you left them. You put them down and they move, We know that, right? Nothing holds together. You cannot hold it together. Even if you, for a minute, you kind of go, okay, it's all good. It's going to fall apart in just a second. So the suffering that we experience, that Buddha's pointing to, is this basic anxiety that comes from that project that we're totally invested in of making everything work. And why don't we quit? Because we would rather do this familiar thing, even though it never proves to be useful. We can see every day that it's futile, but we would rather do that than face the unknown. At least we know what this is like. So rather than face total uncertainty, well, if I'm not doing this, what's going to happen? So we're very attached to this project. That's dukkha. That's what in Sanskrit is called dukkha. That's the suffering, the first noble truth. The second truth is the cessation of suffering, which is that the whole project is completely unnecessary. It is not who we are. it is not how we have to live. There's so much more to us than the jigsaw puzzle. It's just a trick, you know? And if we were able to just let it go, we would discover all these other, how much bigger than that we are, how much grander we are, how much wiser and more loving and more compassionate we are, because we could, you just imagine it, if you could say, get up from the table, walk away from the jigsaw puzzle, you'd be able to see the whole rest of the world, you know? But we don't, we're just like, you know, totally absorbed in it. But the point is that we already have, we are already Buddhas, basically. We have Buddha nature. The same way that ice has water and milk has butter, we have Buddha nature. We don't believe it. We don't have an experience of it, so we're not really going to just drop everything and see, you know? It's like, no, we aren't going to do that. But I forgot to read you a quote. There's one that I don't want to leave. Trungpa said, "You often feel cheated in life because you do not have the facility to synchronize thousands of things at once, to fit the pieces together. So there is natural automatic pain and anxiety, and we call it suffering." And I thought of the analogy of trying to push water uphill with your bare hands. And people are going, you could stop that. But you're like, no, I'm going to get it soon. It's going to be okay, right? So Buddha said that ignorance is the cause of suffering. Not this puzzle making, but the fact that we don't pay attention to what we're doing. You know, we ignore what we're doing. We look the other way. We pretend, I'm not doing anything, right? This is just life happening to me. I didn't make this happen. And if I did, I would make it different. But, you know, no, this is what I have, you know? And so we just ignore reality. And so it's that ignorance that is the cause of it. And also we ignore all the harm that comes from it. All the sort of like diminished relationships we have with people because they don't fit the jigsaw puzzle, or the judgment we put on other people because they're not behaving like we want them to, they're not moving where we want them to go, and that sort of thing. And Trungpa, again, he said it this way. He said, we're swimming in oceans of ice water of anxiety, and we don't even see that we are suffering. That is our fundamental stupidity. Kind of harsh words. But I think climate change is a great example of our collective ability to be ignorant, right? I mean, how many people have you heard going, gee, it's really hot this summer? Surprise, surprise, you know? And like, or I think about this all the time, that like COVID we're still in the middle of the effects of the pandemic, but no one talks about it. It's like people go, I haven't seen you in years. Where have you been? I'm just like, I was home with COVID. What do you think? You know what I mean? But there's this like gap we've decided we're not going to look at that right now anymore. We're tired of it. We're going to move away from it. It's shocking. It's really shocking. And so people are talking about Joe Biden is causing inflation. No, COVID caused inflation. I mean, hello, the world stopped, and then it had to start again, and then things stopped, and then there was profit. Anyway, it's way more complicated, but you know, it's amazing, it's astonishing how much we can ignore what's going on. So ignorance, denial, delusion, confusion, that's the cause of suffering. That's the second truth. And I think I skipped to the cessation, but let's go to there now. Cessation is the third And it's that we have Buddha nature. We don't need to be doing this. This is not who we really are. There's more to us than this. And we know in our bones that there's something else going on besides all this puzzle struggle. But yeah, we'd rather stick with what we're comfortable with instead of the uncertainty. Buddha, however, experienced this peace and this wholeness of his nature and this vastness of his mind. And then he got up from the tree and he pointed it out to us, and he started teaching about it, and he gave us that information. Guess what? There's more than you think. You are more than you think. Your thoughts are not who you are. And so we can contemplate for ourselves what that means. And I use this myself all the time. I think when something's happening and I'm sure that it's terrible, I have learned a trick to just go, what if it's not what I think it is? What if I'm wrong in my assessment of this situation? And so many times it turns out that I am. You know, this person that I'm sure is going to be my enemy turns out to be my friend. We're just not very good at this kind of stuff, you know? We make mistakes constantly. But we have the capacity to see beyond it. And according to the Buddhist teachings, our enlightenment, our Buddha nature, is constantly showing itself to us. There are gaps in our experience where that stuff comes through. Your awareness lights up sometimes and you go, oh, such and such, so and so, I see, oh, I see. But we just keep going. We just go, oh, yeah, whatever, and keep going, right? But the fact is we experience this stuff all the time. And so that leads to the path, which is to look at what we're doing. And once we see what's happening, everything kind of takes care of itself. So the path that we follow is to follow the Buddha's example of doing no harm, practicing good behavior and doing good in the world, helping the world as much as we can, and training our minds. And that means meditation. We've talked about that. There also are all these other trainings that we'll talk about in the next couple of weeks that he gave. There's a lot. But the fundamental thing is to try to see clearly, to try to let our delusions move and change and dissolve. And they do resolve on their own if we let them. It's like we can't talk ourselves out of things, but we can allow this quieter, gentler, more spacious self to be present, and then the puzzle maker, puzzle fixer softens and falls away. Yeah.
In that example that you gave about, like, I think this person is going to be my enemy and it turns out that they're not, do you think that that ties back to, like, this is what I believe my puzzle is going to contain and they weren't a part, like, would that be kind of a cause?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times, you know, the puzzle was so sad because you met someone that looked like that person in the past, and that past person was mean to you. So this person must be mean too. Or, you know, there's like, we are just functioning on not enough information all the time, and we're prejudiced towards certain things. They call it habitual patterns. We have like, oh, well, I'm never friends with people with red hair. That just isn't part of my picture, you know? So mindfulness meditation is our path for discovering how things really are. And we talked about it last time, and we'll practice it again tonight. But it's a very, very, very peaceful practice. It's basically assuming the posture of a Buddha and letting our mind relax and open and see what it wants to see. It's called, the meditation is called, in Sanskrit, is called shamatha, shamatha, and it's usually translated in English as mindfulness. In Thich Nhat Hanh called it peace meditation, and it's also translated into English as calm abiding. And that's what it boils down to, is calmly abiding and just letting things be, peacefully abiding. So I have a note here, pause for questions and comments. So. Thank you, Jenny. Anything else? Anybody else? Just said a lot of stuff. No? I can keep going. Yeah, a little bit further. Okay. So I want to talk now about Pema's article. And Pema, if you don't know her, she's an American-born Buddhist nun. She grew up as Deirdre Brown, and she was married and had children. She's a granny now. But in the 1980s, she became one of the first Western women to be ordained as a Tibetan nun, fully ordained as a Tibetan nun. And before that, she was a school teacher. So she's an amazingly popular, she's one of the most popular teachers because she's got the same experience we have, She had divorces and child custody battles and whatever, job bosses, lousy bosses, everything. And she had this extraordinary exposure to Tibetan teachers and fantastic training. And she can teach really well. So I wanted you to have one of her readings. And in this one, she talks about her experience with impermanence a lot, which is good. Things shifting all the time. And how I love the conversation she described with Chogyam Trungpa, where she said, I'm in this transition and it's painful. And he was like, you're always in transition. Nothing but transition in life. So just let it go. Be with it. You'll be fine. It sounds easy. But the other thing she talks about is egolessness. And so I need to pause and talk about the word ego. Because and this is the problem of putting these experiences into language. People struggle to describe the whole process that Chogyam Trungpa described as puzzle fixing pieces is what they summarize as the word ego, or sometimes they call it self. But the idea is that this constructed conception of yourself that you're putting together all the time, and it's always falling apart, but you're always scraping it back together and holding it up, And that is summarized by the word ego. And I think the word ego in English, we have Freud, we have baggage for that word sometimes. And even self, you think selfish, selfless, it has baggage too. So it's hard to think about that. But just know that when she talks about egolessness as a quality of our lives, which is the way the Buddha teaching is usually described, what they're saying is there's no jigsaw puzzle. There's no project of constructing your life. It's just happening. And so that whole effort of deciding who you're going to be and making all these choices and decisions and, everything to construct this person is what they call ego. It's really a process more than a thing. And when we meditate, we can see it in action. So sometimes if you think, I'm going to see my ego, when I start meditating, I'll see my ego. It's like you think you're maybe going to meet this person that lives inside of you, Oh, there you are, And that's not it. It's like because there's nothing inside. There's no person in there. There's just energy happening and relating to the world happening and reaction to things. And gosh, that's my brother calling. Oh.
That's why you went off.
Am I back? Am I back?
Thanks, George.
He has extraordinary timing. Anyway, so what you see when you meditate is you see your mind putting it together. You see that process of like, well, maybe this, or maybe that, or maybe this. And yeah, that's just what you see. And it's like, sometimes it's shocking when people first sit to meditate. They're shocked at how much activity is going on in their minds that they weren't aware of. And they think, oh, I've got to stop this. Oh my gosh, I've got to stop this. I had that thought when I first started sitting. I thought I wasn't supposed to think, and I was thinking, and I was trying to hit every thought with a baseball bat, like whack-a-mole, stop it. And it just made me so miserable that I got up and ran away, literally, from the meditation session. And they were like, wait. And I was like, no, I'm out of here. I can't do this. But it's not that. It's not that you have to stop thinking. You just have to be aware. Remember, ignorance is the problem, not the puzzle making. I mean, in some ways, there's no way we get away from that, because we do have to keep this body alive. We do have to keep the bills paid. There are certain things we have to keep together. So we're always going to be doing that. It's not that that's the problem. It's that we ignore it and are not aware of it, and we're doing it blindly. So meditation is about seeing the activity, just seeing it, not trying to mess with it, not trying to fix it, not trying to put the pieces together, just seeing that, oh, that's my mind. It's working away, it's churning away. It's working, and that's okay. The more you look, things begin to become clearer, the activity settles down, peace really does come. It may take a while, but you do make peace. You make peace with yourself. And you can let all that stuff be going on, and you can let it just be, and not jump around because of it, and not do harm because of it. And maybe have some good ideas about doing good out of it, especially when what happens is that you begin to have compassion for everybody else, because you realize they're doing the same thing. You're just as confused as you are. So the people that look like they have it all together don't. And the people that are mean to you are just being stupid and ignorant. They don't have a grudge against you. They're just helpless too. And so Pema talks about, the result of this deciding to let go. She said, I'm quoting her, Buddha pointed out that the fixed idea that we have about ourselves as solid and separate from each other is painfully limiting. It is possible to move through the drama of our lives without believing so earnestly in the character that we play. Just remember, it's a play, She describes, I told you that, and she points to the limited thinking that sustains our puzzle problems and the harm that comes from it. But if we train our minds, she pointed out that we can have more flexibility, adaptability, humor, playfulness, relaxation, peace. All of these things come from the simple act of sitting peacefully with yourself and letting yourself become aware, letting yourself begin to know how your mind works. So she asked, how are we going to spend this brief lifetime? Are we going to strengthen our well-perfected ability to struggle against uncertainty, or are we going to train in letting go? So that is my talk. Okay, now it's your turn, honestly. We will meditate too for a few minutes, but before we do that, I would love to hear your reactions. Yes?
I can't remember if we talked about this last week, but the idea of like controlling the mind and training the mind. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, there's like letting go and there's peacefulness, but then using words like training,
Yeah.
controlling feels like that's a little bit in contrast.
Yeah, that's a perfect question, because there is a paradox there. There definitely is. I mean, we are so attached to the project that a word like training is a good word, because you literally have to peel your fingers off the steering wheel. You know what I mean? It's not easy necessarily. You don't just sit down and peace comes, unfortunately. There's going to be some discipline involved and some effort. But the effort of what? The effort of maintaining an open heart and peacefulness, and an effort of like really earnestly trying to follow the Buddha's example, and to find out what your inner Buddha looks like and sounds like, So it isn't about creating a state of mind as much as it's a discipline of allowing a state of mind to emerge. And it is a paradox. I mean, people work with it, and all I can say is eventually you'll work it out. And we have when we teach the Wednesday night meditation class, the first thing people struggle with is just getting to the cushion once in a while. That first, it's not so much what happens on the cushion, although we do talk a lot about that, but a lot of times we talk about how do you get it into your life. And that's the training part. That's like you have to make a commitment. You have to actually schedule it and work with it. There's some effort. But when you get there, when you're sitting there, the effort is just staying present and being peaceful, seeing, looking. Good question, thank you. Yes?
I want to recommend my favorite Pema book,
Yes?
Comfortable with Uncertainty,
Uh-huh.
because I am not, not at all. And it just gives so many practical, useful tips and ways to become comfortable with that. That's one of my main problems. I don't like change. I don't like uncertainty. And this book is fabulous. I just wanted to recommend it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, she's really good and really popular. And she's written, I don't know how many books.
Oh, yeah.
So you could pick up almost any one of them. And yeah. What else?
So it makes me think of the word surrender.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those words that, depending on how you're looking at it, it can be a weakness to some.
Right.
And it can be the most courageous than other times.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think about that one kind of like getting to meditation is like, do I want to surrender to myself,
Right.
Right now and do this, or do I need this energy to kind of get through my day, or, whatever.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that just what I gathered from Pema,
Yeah.
that she speaks of surrender.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a really good question, because the ego or whatever, the fixated self that we're playing with all the time, fights back when people start meditating. Goes, what are you doing? You don't have to do this. You're fine. Get up. Go to work. And that's what we're talking about when people are saying, I can't get myself to meditate. It's just like, and there's not really any answer to that. It's just like, yeah, it is. we are uncomfortable with uncertainty. We are like pretty committed to what we're doing right now. If I just keep at it, it's going to fit together any minute now, right? Very hard to let go. And there's no point in fighting, you know. But I think we talk about this in the class. There's all these tricks, like you feel yourself feeling that resistance, and you go, "Oh, look at that resistance! Oh, look at that!" You know? Oh yeah. Or I'm so resistant. Yeah, you know. And then you just follow the next breath or whatever. But or sit down anyway and do it, you know. The other thing we talk about in terms of training is like set a goal, set a reasonable goal. Not, I'm going to sit an hour every day and then don't. But, you know, I'm going to sit 10 minutes for the next week every morning and see what that feels like. And then do that and see what that feels like. And if it feels good, make it 20 minutes, you know, or something like that. That just acknowledge that there's this play going on, this interplay going on. It's not really surrendering to it as much as just acknowledging it and welcoming it and not fighting it, going, yeah, no, I'm not going to fight with you. That's a really good question. And the thing is, the resistance changes form over time. It gets more and more subtle. Like you'll get no problem sitting an hour every day, but then something else comes along, you know. We live in a world that reinforces the problem-solving mindset and doesn't reinforce the peacefulness mindset that is considered to be really foolish in our world, right? Normally, you're weak, you know, you're a fool. You're gonna sit down and let those people run over you? What are you doing, you know? And it's like, what, off in a cave? What an idiot, you know? But you just have to keep going and see what happens. And it takes bravery. Pema talks a lot about bravery too in her writings. What else? I think we're gonna maybe meditate for a minute and then maybe you'll think of something, okay? So let's do that. So remember I'm just gonna walk through it again, but you'll do it yourselves. Take an upright posture. Try to maybe like that, but not quite as, he's metal, you're not. So upright, your eyes are open, but looking softly down, looking into space, basically. Your eyes are looking into space. Your body is relaxed and peaceful. And step one is settling your body comfortably. Step two is opening to your awareness to the space around you by watching your breath come and go. Breathe out into space and let go of whatever you're holding on to, and breathe in nourishment from the environment, oxygen, you know, good stuff, in and out, and feel that sense of expansion, settled, expanded, and then just let go and look at what's happening. Notice the thinking that's going on and let it just happen. Don't worry about it, just look at it. Be curious. And if you get carried away, you forget what you're doing, you can come back to the body, you can come back to the breath. Oh yeah, well, there's my breath. You know, if you find yourself in an argument with somebody, you'll just find yourself there and then come back to your body. So we'll do that for a few minutes, okay? 4 minutes. But you know what 4 minutes feels like. So it's really great to have the experience of doing this together with other people. And it's like one of the things that happens is you see the million different ways that people express exactly the same teachings, you know, and how it passes through people differently, but still in a wholesome way. And so it's good that we talk about it together. It's good that we share our experiences with each other. Thich Nhat Hanh used to say that meditating in a group is like putting more logs on the fire. The fire burns brighter. Yeah. So it's true. We have that. So you guys all look so peaceful. Is it bedtime? Is that the deal? It's a school night? Yeah.
I had a very interesting meditation the last time we were here on Wednesday.
Huh?
The entire time we were here, there was a man on a PA system speaking very loudly. It sounded like he was preaching. We couldn't really understand what he was saying, and I couldn't stop thinking about, I wonder what he was. He stopped 5 minutes before we were finished, and that's all I could think about tonight. What was he saying? What was he doing? Who was he talking to?
Was this in your head or outside?
No.
Okay.
Ask Mick and
There's a
Jacob.
stadium at the
Episcopal
over
school.
Oh,
But
okay.
Right
it
over
didn't
there.
sound like a ball game, did it to you?
I don't know what it was.
Anyway, that's all I can think about. What was
You never
he
know.
Very
saying?
distracting.
He was so impassioned.
No.
I don't know, that's how my meditation went.
So tonight you're working on that. What was that guy? Yeah?
There's a lot of things, I mean, it happens to me. You sometimes hear the water fountain out there? Yeah, so.
Yeah.
Sometimes it'll sound like people talking. It's like, and it's the brain just wanting to grab onto something to secure some ground,
Yeah,
and like not doing anything, and so same way with that. It's your mind.
yeah, I watched it.
Yeah.
The train was so much more peaceful than the sky. It was kind of soothing.
Yeah, the train was good.
Well, during my meditation, one of the things that I thought about and then observed and tried to let go was the idea of suffering and like the analogy with the puzzle that you brought up tonight. I think of suffering as like people die or people get sick
Yeah.
or your plans get disrupted and that causes suffering. But there's also this like awareness of things in the world that cause suffering and that you, like you mentioned tonight, like are ignorant or are needless. Like they seem like they're not necessary. And I guess I just was thinking like oysters and mussels, you know, are like in marine environments, filter out toxins and pollutants. And I always think, but what about those mussels? Or what about the oysters? Like they do this good service for their environment, but they're kind of stuck with the toxins. How, like, I wonder if you can talk about how in pursuit of freedom and peace, how like to approach suffering that we're aware of and trying to pay attention to it enough to know how to help in response to that suffering, but not get so overwhelmed, not be stuck holding
Mhm.
the weight of the suffering.
Yeah, it's hard. We talk about this a lot in our various Buddhist practice groups. And remember when the pandemic started, one of our teachers, we were meeting with him on Zoom, and he said to us, okay, Bodhisattva's in training, now's your time.
Yeah.
Here we are.
It's go time.
This is us, that's right.
Yeah.
We're all, get off the bench, you know? And it's scary, but there is this, first of all, you can't be more kind to other people than you are to yourself. It's just a fact, you know, you don't have more gas than there is in the tank. So you have to make sure that you're kind to yourself. And that's where a lot of us are falling down, right? Especially compassionate people, or we think we are. We're going to take care of everyone else first, and then we'll get to us. We never do. And so we're all walking around depleted. And that habit is a bad one, and we have to work with it. And so this meditation gives you the chance, you know, to kind of fill your gas tank, so to speak. And that will only make you better with everyone around you. It's guaranteed, right? And then the other thing is, if you can look at yourself with compassion, you can look at other people with compassion. And there's nothing better than being seen with compassion by somebody. And I like to catch that happening automatically, because people do it all the time. It's not like you have to be trained necessarily. But I call them bodhisattvas. That's the ideal of a compassionate, fully realized compassionate being. And you see them, I've seen nurses in the hospital treat me with that, like absolute, they see me, they're there for me. It's like so healing just to be in communication with them. And you just see them like that happening all the time. A person who, you know, helps a lady across the street or whatever, you know, picks up someone when they fall down. It's there. And so that, and Pema talks about that. She's like the queen of compassion, by the way. She's really good at that. But she talks about, you can see it as like adding more compassion to the world. You know, the world has a certain store of compassion, and we can, by cultivating it ourselves, we can share it. And we do resonate with each other. People will pick it up from you. And that is part of the Buddhist sort of traditions that we all follow. They talk about the signs that you're a Buddhist. People will come and tell you their troubles. You know, Anab Tupten, he's one of the teachers that's coming here. He's coming here on October 27th. Public talk I will talk more about that. But he said that, and he's a realized Buddhist teacher. He walks through an airport and people tell him their problems. Hey, I wanted to tell you about my mother-in-law, you know? And he just listens and he, you know? That could happen to us too. We could be like that. I don't know if that's an adequate answer, but yeah, and I think one of the outcomes that she talked about, the sort of flexibility and playfulness of your mind that you can get to, of a Buddha's mind, means that you are just less pissed off at the world, you know? And so you're not contributing that to anybody. And,
yeah, that process. Like, how does it come in and not go out? Like,
yeah,
you know, because it's gonna come in. And I think what I hear you saying is like, that's where being right and at peace and playful and a machine of compassion
exactly.
can kind of stop inputs from becoming outputs.
Exactly. You can let it end with you.
I hate that I just made a machine analogy.
No. I like that. I kind of like the
We're
oyster
humans,
analogy,
yeah.
because that's natural and organic. And the same thing is true of what? Mushrooms and,
Yeah.
I mean, fungus and There are all kinds of other things. I like trees because they take our air pollution and they turn it into oxygen we can breathe, which is pretty damn generous of them.
And they store CO2.
They make air for us, even though we give them all this stuff. But it doesn't kill them. I mean, it may, but I mean, it's okay. It can work. You can handle it.
They also use their root system to store it in the ground, which carbon is one of the 3 fundamental components that make up healthy soil.
Yeah, so they take it and feed the soil with it and give us the oxygen. I mean, it's amazing. Well, we are sort of, it's 8:03, so it's probably time to stop, but this was great. I hope you liked it. I'm glad you were here. Next time, the readings are about, let's see, let me look at this. We talk about, I think we talk about taking refuge. Yeah. Moral conduct and the practice of meditation. So you get to read Chogyam Trungpa.
Oh.
My guy, yeah. He's great. I hope you like him. He was also Pema's teacher, so. Yeah, so we'll talk about more methods tomorrow, next Monday. And yeah, so thank you for coming. You can help us put the chairs away like last time. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Thank you.